All right, let's get into this one because it should be a fun one. Bundalo. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Welcome to the library. I'm coming to you from here today because I thought what we'd do is have a quick conversation about a, well, rather obscure Conan miniseries from the late 1990s. Now, you guys already saw the thumbnail. You clicked on it way back there, and that's what brought you to here. So, you know we're talking about the Conan the Barbarian River of Blood miniseries today, which is, well, it's an interesting one. So what I thought we would do today, let's just walk through this here quickly. I thought what I'd do first is set some context. Context being when, where, why, how, even, well, maybe not how. Okay, forget the how. We're not going to do the how. We're going to talk about that first. Then what I want to talk about is something that I thought was done really, really well with this. And then what we'll do is we'll jump into what could have maybe been done a little better for my taste, but actually wasn't that bad. And then we'll come back to this at the end of the day and we'll ask that bajillion-dollar question, Tennessee Fats, should I buy this? Well, maybe. Without any further ado, let's jump into some context. What are we talking about here? When, how, why, who? No, forget, we're not doing the how. Anyways, let's get into it. All right, let's talk context. Let's start with that right now. When, why, how, and who? These are some good questions that we really need to know to understand what's going on in this particular story. Because really, I think the majority of this actual story is all in the context, which is a strange thing to say, but you'll see where and why and how when we get to that other chapter down the road, okay? Let's talk context first. So I'll tell you, I sat down to read this bad boy. I opened the first page, and we'll talk about some of the actual layout and what's within the book later. But I run into a panel, and I'm going to put this panel up right over here. And this is a key warning, all right? If you're ever out there and you're reading Marvel comics, particularly the Marvel Conan miniseries, and you see one of these, you need to stop. You need to stop flat right then and right there. One of the things that I'll always give Marvel its credit for is that it does an excellent job of doing the editorial asterisks of doom. And I call it the editorial asterisks of doom all of the time because it is. Marvel has got this running just miasma of history of all of its characters. It's this running long track record that goes and goes and goes. If this is the current point, by the way, this is me continuing to go and go and go and go. Like, you can't see it. Right now, my other arm is on the other side of the room. That's how much history sits behind these characters. So when Marvel's writing a current story, one of the things it makes sure it does is when something is referenced, and it's something where you as the reader need to be aware of it to understand the context, they go, asterisk, and they throw it in there. This asterisk is particularly throwing us back to a couple issues of Savage Sword of Conan. Now, if I remember correctly, there was a break in actually even how these Savage Sword of Conan issues hit the public, when I think back on it now. But you had to have read those. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler on this one, and I'm going to jump the shark on this, and I'm going to tell you right now, this whole thing, and that whole story that they're referencing with that asterisk of doom, is the follow-up story to Red Nails. Red Nails, for most Robert E. Howard fans, is possibly one of your most favorite, bestest Robert E. Howard works ever, or it's one of your most least favorite, I hate it books ever. It's really, as a Robert E. Howard fan, I know when I talk to other people, there's a real divide on this one. Some people just absolutely love it. Other people despise it. And it's interesting, really trying to talk through and what's actually driving people in these two different directions. We could go down a lot of different roads in this one, and we're not going to do it today. That could be a whole video in and of itself. We're just not going to do that today. But Red Nails is one of the longer ones. It's one of the more detailed stories, and it's a character story that really does add a little bit of growth for Conan, a fair amount of growth for Valeria, and really gives you a sense of context of what these characters are capable of. And I will say that about Red Nails. It does a very good job of doing all that. It introduces characters that are larger than life. It introduces characters that are smaller than life. It introduces characters all across the spectrum. And there's a series of challenges that Valeria and Conan need to go through in order to actually survive and get out of that. Well, Red Nails ends with basically everybody in the town of Zucotl just being dead. They gone. They died. There's nothing left. Conan and Valeria go wandering off into the desert, and that's the end of it. That's the end of the story. That is actually some pretty pivotal information you need to know here. And this is an interesting one as to why this is pivotal. It's pivotal because you don't realize what the actual ruin of Zucotl potentially could mean to the area around it until you start reading some of the material that comes after it. And this is where this really gets into why is this important today, Tennessee Fats. Tell me what's going on. What happens after Red Nails? After Red Nails, I'll tell you, Tor Books put out a book. It was written by, I believe the guy's name was Richard Green. I think I got that correctly, Richard Green. And that book is called, Conan and the Gods of the Mountain? Conan and the Gods of the Mountain. I have not read that, okay? Have not read the book, haven't got my hands on it, haven't actually gone through it. But I will tell you this much. That comes before Conan the River of Blood. The idea here is Red Nails has occurred. It's happened in Zucotl. Now, hold on. Before we continue going on here, I want to take a moment. Let's just stop for a second and answer the question, what's Zucotl? All right, geography check. All right, now, we already talked about this Zucotl place before, but let's just put a link up over here for those of you who haven't seen that one where we talk about Red Nails and the geographic disparity that may or may not be there. In that video, we concluded the Zucotl we're talking about here is, in fact, this one. Not this one. This. No. This. That's the one. Back to the story. Okay, so we're back now, all right? So Zucotl. We know which Zucotl we're talking about. I'm going to continue pronouncing it as Zucotl because that's just how I choose to pronounce it. Now, this is an important one here, okay? Zucotl is right directly north of this kingdoms where Conan and Valeria have found themselves into now. Zucotl has fallen. And as a result of Zucotl falling, there has been a massive political fallout in the surrounding area. Because one of the things that's not discussed in Red Nails, but that's inferred in the Tor book of Gods and the Mountain, Gods of the Mountain, whatever that is that it's had immediate political impacts on the area around it. Conan and Valeria have found themselves wandering through the jungle during one of these times where the political fallout is becoming more and more fractious. It's becoming more and more frictional. It's becoming more and more violent. I think we'll go with that word as opposed to the prior two that I just threw in. Violent. Yes, and that's really the environment that they're in here. Effectively, they can find no safe haven because basically everybody currently is at war until basically you have the fallout end after the fall of Zucotl. Interesting that Robert E. Howard didn't play up the whole Zucotl thing as being a massive political power at all. Yet in the follow-up series, that follow-up book, suddenly it did become that. So Marvel's just leaned right into that. He's like, yep, absolutely, sure. And that's the environment that Conan and Valeria are in. They are wandering into a jungle between fighting tribes where they could or could not be safe. All right, there you go. Now we've got context, okay? That's where the story starts. Let's get into some of the other things. What went really, really well with this? All right, let's talk about something that went really, really well with this. And I think I want to lead off with this one because oftentimes when you get to these sort of mini-series that were in that Marvel doldrum years, and I've referred to that many, many times on this channel, you find that really Marvel was kind of losing its way almost. It was to a point where they didn't really know what to do with the IP. And at that point in time, they just weren't throwing the best assets at it. Let's just call it as it is, shall we? But this one surprises you. The art. Let's talk about this for a minute here because I'm going to call this the what was done really well within this particular series. The art's done by Jeff Isherwood on this one. And honestly, there's a lot in here that really jumps out at you. And it's not just the art in and of itself, it's also the art and the editorial choices that were made in its layout. I'm going to start with something right here, and we're going to put this image up, and I'm going to have to try to do this one kind of on top of me talking, so let's see if it works magically. Here we go. Boom. If everything worked perfectly, what you're looking at right now is that gatefold cover that's in the front of every one of these mini-series issues that came out around this point in time. And by this point in time, I mean the summer of 1998. Now, I've given some of these other miniseries when I've looked at those kind of grief about these very foldouts, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is I don't really like the way that they've done this sort of the quick write-up in the corner down there where it talks about Conan. It almost makes it like a Conan the Adventurer type intro where it seems like he's He-Man out there righting wrongs like some barbarian superhero, which he's not. That's not what Conan is all about. Granted, the Conan the Adventurer series of cartoons was quite good, and honestly, I think it had its place in its time. But it's not what Conan was meant to be the way Robert E. Howard wrote it. So to me, that's always been a little bit off. But the other thing that came out of these, let's go, hopefully we're back to me now and not still looking at that image. The other thing that happened with these was invariably what happened as these stories were coming out was the stories were changing as it was being published. So when you're reading these gatefolds, which are supposed to give you the background of what happened prior to issue 1, or you're in issue 2 and it's telling you what happened in issue 1, or you're in issue 3 and it's telling you what happened in issues 1 and 2, the story in there changes. There's been a couple of these where I've gone through it. By the time I'm reading issue number 3, the editorial write-up in that gatefold that comes out is different than what I actually read in issues number 1 and 2. And that's not a good thing. This one, it worked perfectly though. Obviously somebody at Marvel on the editorial team knew what they were doing on this one because nothing changed. Everything stayed the same. And the actual gatefold worked for the purpose it was supposed to do. It gave you the context. And I thought that was really, really well done. So that, thumbs up on that one. Second aspect here is just simply the art. Jeff Isherwood did the art on this one. And quite frankly, you guys know I'm a big fan of Jeff Isherwood's art in general. I actually have a sketch of his in the Tennessee Fast Traveling Sketchbook right now, which I'm quite happy with. And it is actually of Conan, which is quite cool. Jeff Isherwood also did work around the same point. So actually just prior to this point in time, he was working on the Doctor Strange title for Marvel. He was also working on the Namor title for Marvel. And one of the things that Jeff Isherwood's style blends itself very well to are the mystical, the things that are fantastical, things that are just out there. They're just boom, look at this. It's crazy and it's an insane idea, but Jeff Isherwood just drew it, right? Like it's one of these things where it's like, wow, this guy clearly gets it. He gets how to draw somebody that's physically massive. We saw that in Namor when he was drawing that at that point in time. He knows how to draw these esoteric things. We see it in Doctor Strange. And then it blends perfectly here for Conan because you literally have Conan being physically massive and this esoteric magical world that he lives within. And what Jeff, I think, was somewhat challenged with on this one was probably some of the things that were coming through the very script that he was drawing art to. And again, I'm just assuming that's what actually occurred here. I didn't ask when I met him, at least not specifically about this, because I just read this story just the other day. So never really had a chance. I think this actually was a bit of a challenge for him for a variety of reasons, but I think he did knock it out of the park. I'll talk about why it was a challenge next segment. But let's talk about how he knocked it out of the park. I think one of the big panels I really want to show you guys here, and this is a good one, and I'm going to put it up here. And again, it's going to have to go on top of me. What you're looking at now is a gatefold, not actually a gatefold. It's actually a giant splash page. That's not at the actual centerfold of the actual book, but within that, you have this giant over-the-top art that shows you how Jeff Isherwood lays out a page. And it shows you how he projects the image and draws the reader through it with these fantastic images. He really does nail this. And I'm gonna, let's go back to me. Back to me. And when you see that, you see the giant over-the-top art. Now, granted, it was the 90s and it was Marvel Comics. So there was a certain level of cheesecake that Marvel threw in on their comics. And Valeria being the female character that's in this story, at the beginning of this, there's a fair amount of that cheesecake. But I do want to show, and I'm sharing this panel with you. I'm going to go, this one's going to side by side over here. And I've chosen this particular image for a reason. And what Jeff's done here is he's shown Valeria to be the stronger person, the stronger female role within the Conan story. Valeria is not just some, oh, look at me, I need help, blah, 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 stereotypical trope that fits within a sword and sorcery type story. Valeria is a much more powerful character. We saw Valeria's character grow really a lot in the Red Nails story. And again, for those of you who haven't watched my Red Nails discussion, link right up there for you. Valeria isn't something that's just to be a trope. Valeria is a developed character. Robert E. Howard wrote this for a reason. So when this character is now in this story, despite the fact that she has somewhat of a secondary role that the writer has put her into her, Jeff Isherwood has taken the time to draw her as this really kick-ass character. She's not just sitting there taking any sort of punishment, just dealing with whatever is dealt with her. She's actually taking a lead. And this is how she's drawn. She's drawn as an aggressive, strong, independent woman. And I do think that was something that Jeff did very, very well. So 2 points to Jeff Isherwood. And again, the art now is the second thing that I would say was done really, really well within this miniseries. Now we've covered this whole gatefold thing, which I thought, again, I'm giving Marvel credit on this one, quite good. And the art. Now let's talk about something that, well, maybe I would have liked to see done a little differently. All right, let's talk about what could have potentially been done differently here. This is a safe space, right? We can all just get along and have a conversation without suddenly taking offense. I hope we can, because I hope we've developed that kind of, this is like SCTV 3D. For any of you who are wondering what I'm talking about, Look up Dr. Tongue's 3D House of Horror or 3D House of Cats. I think that was one of my favorites. You get the joke if you got it. Anyways, let's talk about this here in a safe space where we can all just get along, shall we? Old man ramble aside. This story was written by a guy named Roland Green. Now, Roland Green is the guy who wrote the Tor book that came out that was the follow-up to Red Nails. And what happened when this came out, all right, now, I'm going to try to put timeline together in the right way here. I believe, if I'm trying to get this correctly here, that the Savage Sword adaptation of that, which we talked about back in the context, which was adapted by Roy Thomas, was put out prior to that Tor book actually seeing publication. That's my read on it. I believe, again, I don't know when the Tor book came out. It came out somewhere around the same time as this miniseries or immediately before this miniseries. Because Roland Green had the time to write this miniseries. So obviously there's something in here where he had time to do it. Probably following off of the success that Marvel teamed it, of the story that wasn't Savage Sword, and the success that they were expecting to come out of the Tor book. I don't know if it was successful or not. Maybe when I actually read it, I'll tell you. And now they put him into this. So they had him writing this story. Now, here's where I'm at with this. Now, Roland, unfortunately, is no longer with us, which is unfortunate. I hate to hear about anybody that's been in the field and suddenly we lose them as a phenomenal talent. Roland clearly did have talent. He had the talent to be put into place where he was writing a book about Conan. And he wrote other stories as well. You can tickety down the Wikipedia and learn more about him. Here's my critique, though. I don't really think he knew Conan that well. Yeah, I'm going to say that. Granted, he knew what he was writing. He knew how to write a story, apparently. Listen, obviously he did, or he wouldn't have been put to print. But I was finding in this, and again, haven't read the Tor version, that really I was looking at Conan in somewhat of a, almost like a farcical follow the story without really knowing what's going on in the story sort of manner. And if I'm reading between the lines from what was in the Savage Sword story, which was the adaptation of his book, it's almost the same thing. The story itself was such that it was just sort of a rambling thing that was just occurring. And granted, it was a great adventure story. I mean, Conan did go through adventures like it. But at the end of the day, really what happened here? He started off the story in a river, had to go through some rapids, got attacked by crocodiles. Other crocodiles came in and saved him, went to live in a shaman's hut. That was issue 1. Issue 2, decides to help the shaman and his group fight off the other tribe. Starts going on raids, basically enrages the other tribes to the point where they attack back. And they attack back, issue 2. Issue 3, the battle is occurring, which I really don't have a sense of what order the battle's occurring in. And within that, you have really the shaman of the other tribe, who's nameless, who doesn't even get the time to actually explain who he is or why he's doing what he's doing, who's manipulating the chief of the other tribe, who also, in my mind, remained nameless because he was such a minor character. And at the end of the day, the whole kerfuffle happens and they all die. And Conan and Valeria just wander off. To me, the story was just sort of a weird one. There's adventure, don't get me wrong, there's clearly that. But I don't see any growth of the character. I don't see Valeria growing at all. It's the whole weird romantic entanglement between Conan and Valeria when we've seen other aspects of their lives where that's totally different within the same Marvel universe, kind of like go, okay, well, maybe we're at a different point in time in their life, and I get that. I'll give you the pass on that one. But what really threw me off on that one was this image. What you're looking at over here is Conan the Barbarian, who is human, by the way, just in case some of you didn't know. He is human. Picking up a 2,000-pound crocodile corpse and throwing it 3 to 5 yards through the air into I will call it a sorcerer's pot, which is actively being used to cast spells, which causes a massive explosion and kills everybody. You don't see all that part. All you see in this particular image is him lifting up this 2,000-pound crocodile. Now, guys, Conan's human, okay? This is 2,000 pounds. This is really where the story lost me. You know, I'm willing to give a story a lot of grace. I'm willing to give it a lot of play. But, you know, when you're drawing in, or you're writing in, a guy picking up a 2,000-pound crocodile corpse and throwing it, This is where I go, really? Really? No, I get it, sword and sorcery. I get this is fantasy. 2000. Now, I had to Google this because, you know, I do know a fair amount about crocodiles, but in the top of my head, I couldn't do the quick conversion to say, okay, listen, if it's 20 feet, how much does this thing weigh? 2,000 pounds, okay? 2,000 pounds. No, that's unreasonable. It's untenable. It does not make sense to me. And to me, that's really where the story lost me. And it's funny because I read this 3-part series, and then I asked myself the hard question. I said, well, hold on. Maybe there's something to this savage sword thing that whole image at the front told me that I should be reading that comes before this. So I stopped and I read that, and I asked myself, does it get any better after I do that? Okay, that didn't make it any better. Well, yeah, that gives you the answer. I don't see any reason why Conan should be able to pick up a 2,000-pound crocodile and throw it 3 to 5 yards. Again, that story does not help it. So, story-wise, yes, it's a nice adventure story that flows through. But did this need to be a Conan story? No, this literally could have been a story of John Carter, just in a different setting. This could have been a story of, I don't know, who else could this have been? You could have put the Tarzan on this, for crying out loud. You could put a lot of people into this very same scenario. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the Hyborian Age. It doesn't necessarily have to be Valeria. And it definitely didn't have to be Conan. You could literally just change the names and it would have been a completely different story, completely different characters. And maybe it would have gelled better for whatever that character was. So again, to me, nice story, but probably could have been done better. Let's get into the bajillion-dollar question here. Tennessee fact, do I need to buy this thing? All right, it's a bajillion-dollar question. Bajillion. If it's bajillions of dollars and I'm answering it, shouldn't somebody be paying me bajillion? If I label something bajillion-dollar question, does that actually make... No, I think this is one of those cases where when you're saying it, it doesn't actually bring it into reality. The old man aside for the day. Okay, bajillion-dollar question. Tennessee fence. Same one. Should I go out and buy this 3-part series? This is a toughie. This is legitimately a toughie. Okay, here's where I'm at with this. If you're a Cananophile and you need to have all aspects of Conan's life in your collection, and you're a big fan of Jeff Isherwood's art, you should probably buy this. You absolutely should buy this. It's a nice one. It is a good one to have on hand, and it's a good one to have on deck. Now, if you're somebody that's just a cursory Conan sort of fan that just says, yeah, you know, I like to read the odd Conan comic every once in a while, as a standalone story, if you forget all the context, take all of that Red Nails and God of the Mountains thing, throw it right out the window. This isn't a bad standalone story. When you critically step back and look at it and say, does it stand or does it not? It does stand. It's a very quick story. Really, the story could have been self-contained in one issue of Savage Sword of Conan. Just throwing that out there. But they made it a 3-part series. It does stand. It does stand. If you're somebody that's out there that's a real Conanophile that belongs with the whole canon thing, all right? And if you're going to say to yourself, woo, I need to see character growth. I need to see how this fits within the overall Conan universe. And that's really all you read for, you probably can just set this one down. You don't need her. You don't need her because I can't think of any instance in anything else I've read for Conan the Barbarian, before, during, or after this time period, that would say, this is something Conan remembers, this is something that's part of his life experience, and this defines part of his character going forward. Honestly, this was almost like the Jack LaLonde of making a turkey in an air fryer, the set it and forget it. Here's what we did. We wrote our 3 issues, we set it, now let's forget it. And it's unfortunate when that happens to a Conan story, because really, if there was just a couple little tweaks in this, if the editors went back and said, no, I want you to do something major in this that's going to really change this character, I'm pretty sure it could have been done at the time. Well, there you go, everybody. That's the bajillion-dollar question. Answered, signed, sealed, and delivered. All right, let's wrap this bad boy up. Well, everybody, that was our video for today. This was a fun one. I gotta tell you, honestly, I didn't find issue 2 to this series for a long time. I don't know what it was where I was able to find issue 1 and issue 3 relatively easily. But issue 2, which is actually where the majority of the meat and potatoes of this story actually is, I don't know. So when I finally got my hands on this one, I was happy to sit down and read it. It was just a weird experience, though, where when I did read it, and I was like, really? Really? 2,000 pounds? Like, don't get me wrong. Buoyancy being what it is. Maybe you can lift 2,000 pounds underwater, you know, and you're blah, 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 blah. And then when you're out of the water, suddenly everything becomes 2,000 pounds, blah, 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 blah. To me, that just seems rather strange. I don't know. To me, that just, enough. I've already discussed that enough. Everybody, that's our video for this week. I hope you enjoyed this one. Next week, we're probably going to be back with another one of these miniseries reviews. But the next one was written by Roy Thomas. Let's see what happens with that. See you in the next video, everybody. Have yourself a great day.